Welcome back. We were with Rhett Long, longtime newspaper publisher in Utah, and we're going to be talking about some of the craziest Utah stories that maybe you've heard of, maybe you haven't. A lot of them received national headlines because they're so outlandish. And I want to go through these stories. We're going to talk about the lack of journalistic integrity. They just each one is kind of indicative in its own way of how local media is suffering. Would you say, is that how you characterize it? What they have in common?
I think suffering the way that they cover it, or can they cover it? Can they do the story justice? So
yeah, and this first one is quite interesting. It got picked up by the Rolling Stone magazine. It's a guy who came out in Utah County that he was gay. He was married, right? Mm-hmm. And he decided to come out and tell your paper about it because he trusted you with this information that you'd cover it the right way, right?
And see, this is one of the big parts of local journalism that's being lost, and that's the relationships. You know, as a publisher, I did things a lot different than the publishers that I had seen in other newspapers. I wanted to help my editorial team get the best story possible. So when I saw smoke, I would say, hold on, give me 2 days. Let me see if I can't get you some more information. And so I would go in and say, look, we're going to be telling this story. Right now you have a chance to give me an idea of what it is, okay? Because be honest with me right now, because I can help my editorial team know where to go. Not tell them what to write, but where to go dig in the ground to find the right story.
Yeah, have the right sources.
Right. And so that happened with several stories that were going on in Utah County when I was there as a publisher. And so Nathan and a couple of the other county commissioners at the time, we built really good relationships, and they started to trust my team and the stories we were writing because of the way we approached it, because of the friendships, or I don't want to say friendships. I didn't have friendships with them. I had a relationship with them that they could trust, that they knew they could tell me something and it wouldn't go to my editor.
You demonstrated integrity and that you really wanted both sides.
I wanted the best story for my team and to get the best story out of the story. So really what happened was he called and he said, I'd like to have a meeting with you and your editorial team. And I said, okay. And so we went over and Nathan sat down, and it was a very heartfelt story. We're shocked. You know, here's a county commissioner, married, kids, Western lifestyle, cowboy boots, belt buckles, big trucks, the whole thing. And he said, I'm gay. And here's kind of how it happened, and I've always known, kind of thing. And so it was a very heartfelt, and I was very proud that he felt the confidence that he could call us and that we would tell the story correctly. And
why did he want to come out in that manner?
You know, how do you make that decision? I mean, do you talk to your publicist? Do you talk, who? And I think
he didn't want it getting in the wrong hands, right, where it could be distorted.
Yeah.
And
let's have a press conference and bring everybody in.
I guess I get that, yeah.
And so that was how it was broke. So Katie English, a really good little writer for us, she was the one that was given the opportunity to go sit down with him one-on-one and write the story. And he did, and she did, and as you can see, it was picked up by everybody.
Yeah, unbelievable. The Deseret News, the Rolling Stone, ABC4, I think you name it, Los Angeles Times, NBC News, all picked it up because it's so rare that a LDS Mormon guy who's kind of a public figure is going to come out like that with kids and just say, "Hey, I'm gay," and did he go on these outlets and take interviews, or was that only with you? Or?
He did, but it wasn't. It was very short snippets. I mean, he wasn't going into the kind of story that he shared with us. It was, yes, I've reported it, and I think enough's been said, kind of thing. So
he ended up losing his bid to be reelected.
Yeah.
And he believed he lost because of the homophobic community in Utah County. Do you think people in Utah County are homophobic?
I don't know them all.
Guess you can't speak for all of them. Yeah, it's an interesting story because the LA Times also picked it up, and so so.
But those are the relationships.
Yeah, it's really cool that he understood that here's a local publisher and a local publication who still wants to get the story right. Get their facts straight, and so I'm going to come out to them, and obviously it ended up being a huge story, and you guys scooped it. And so moving on, so this other story you brought, I didn't hear about this, but this also made huge headlines. Utah Mayor David Young spat on and punched by journalist daughter Lene Pugmire after slamming her mother's investigation into his business dealings. You guys were involved in that story as well.
Well, here's one where the newspaper let the writer down. They haven't come out and defended the work she did. But when you investigate really what it was that was written, you've got a mayor who, with his son in another state, had a business dealing, the son particularly. But now there's $1 million lawsuit. It's in the Supreme Court in that state. And so he feels like it's not news. And he said that. So
now wait, who doesn't feel like it's news?
The mayor.
The mayor doesn't feel like it's news.
On 9/19 and the mayor's closing remarks, he goes through and talks about several of the stories that had been written about the city council and different issues the city was involved in, and then he gets into the personal side of it. And the whole thing is this public record. This isn't like she's digging hard. And why would she interview the opposing attorney and the opposing side of a lawsuit, and then claim that nobody from nobody from the paper reached out to him until somebody from the Standard Examiner did. And so when you look at it, here's a mayor determining what's news. Mm-hmm. And
every elected official would like to determine what the news is.
Exactly. So the whole thing is this is just a story where, unfortunately, there's no excuse for her daughter punching a mayor, slapping a mayor, spitting. There's no excuse for that. But the problem is you're gonna see the slant now that the newspaper really is kind of put in a bad place, and so is Janelle, and yet she did her job, from what I see, exactly the way I would have wanted her to do it.
Let's show this clip really quick of what actually happened. Can we get the audio on this, Troy? Oh, whoops! I didn't know they were gone. Well, I'll play the video. I'll just make it full screen. So what you can see here is the mayor. This is the daughter of the reporter.
Yes, it is.
And she started going after him. Then he kind of went after her a little bit, but she obviously was
being spit on by Linnea Pugmire.
And
later on, she hit
she
him.
smacked him.
I spoke to Mayor Young about what happened.
So she charges towards me.
So I
spits
felt
at
really
me.
bad that anything like this
spits
would ever happen. But I can tell you that Janelle, from what I saw, did her job. She reported what was out there, and he took it personally. And you can watch the 9/19, caption. And he was actually even said that he had been warned not to go into this.
Why did her daughter go after him?
I think she was just tired of him, speaking poorly of her mother. So,
really?
So.
Yeah, that was a big story too,
because Janelle's is a really, she covers the church for the newspapers, for both Standard and for the Daily Herald, and she's wired into the LDS Church, and so she has a lot of support there. She's really well liked, and so unfortunately, the mayor's in a bad place. And Janelle's in a bad place, and it just shouldn't have happened.
And is he still mayor?
Still mayor.
Okay.
Still mayor.
And he's well liked by the folks there?
I don't know how mayors are always one of those things where how much I think depends on the day.
Yeah.
It's kind of like being a publisher. One day, 50% right, and the next day you're 50% wrong, you know?
Yeah, well, speaking of Utah County, I mean, kind of coming from an outsider, Salt Lake feels like, I don't know, it feels like we're way far from Utah County because it's way predominantly Mormon in Utah County. It feels more and more non-Mormon, more secular in Salt Lake City. And I look at Utah County and it feels like the Mormon church influence over politics and news and reporting is really dominant. Like, does anybody do stories critical of the church's treatment of certain issues and things? We talked about LGBTQ a little bit.
Tribune mostly, you know,
Just the Tribune,
they
yeah.
would cover it. I thought our team did a good job. You know, we had the Pride Parade and the different things that were going on, and we always covered it because it was real. You know, it's just one of those things where it's a topic that's touchy in a community like Provo and Orem, and let's just face it, the whole county.
And it feels like there's more going on at the campus of BYU, pride marches and sort of pushback by the LGBT community. Does that get covered extensively in the Provo Herald? And
it did when we were there. If it came up, if that was happening, we tried to understand where it was coming from. Are they just trying to make a point, or is this something that they're doing for the culture and for the people themselves? Because it's a big difference.
Yeah,
big difference.
Yeah, and where we report, I call it the good old boys club, where you've got these developers / politicians, and a lot of them are like in the, for lack of a better term, the deep state of Utah politics. Like the guy, I mean, the people who are deciding the gondola is going to go up Little Cottonwood Canyon, they're non-elected leaders. The people who are on the board of UTA and UDOT and the Visit Salt Lake, and they just can make lots of huge decisions and not be held accountable to voters. The state homeless coordinator, we've talked about him a lot, Niederhauser. Do you feel like that's getting enough reporting, and do you think there could be more work being done on that?
Well, everything that I've read on it feels like it's another one of those topics that it's going to be blue, as we talked about the blue sky. It's going to help the canyon be blue over time. It's going to, and that always seems to win the day. So that 10% or 15% that are for it and the other 85 are against it, it's, well, what's it going to look like in 2050? And that's what they're looking at.
Yeah.
In 2050, 85% will be glad we did it.
I just mean, like, I just feel like this state homeless coordinator, there's now $200 million going through his office. I kind of want to know where that money's going and why he, as a developer, his whole career, and, the Utah State Legislature, a state Senate president, why he appoints himself to that role and then takes his salary of $45,000 a year, ups it to $250,000 a year. Why do you get to have that job? And why do you get to, what makes you qualified to be the state homeless coordinator?
And that's a whole different story that needs to be told.
Yeah.
Because it's another one. So often these appointments, they don't get vetted. Mm-hmm. There's nobody to do it.
Yeah, and it seems like he had the power already to appoint himself. Because when I asked the guys in the know, he said, yeah, he appointed himself. Gave himself a nice appointment after he retired from the Senate. So it's just one of those things where I look at it like, why isn't somebody bigger than us reporting on this?
Yep.
But the last story you brought is a big rabbit hole. I got clued in on this by kind of a crazy, well, I shouldn't say crazy, mentally, psychologically challenged person, probably. She was telling me, we got to break this story wide open, that this is a huge, there's so much more to this. You got to dig deep and find it and report on all the facts. It's the story that David Levitt, the county attorney for Utah County, was involved in a child, not sex trafficking ring, but
accused of
it being involved in a sex trafficking ring, also cannibalism. that there was a satanic cult. This story's kind of resurfaced back from an interview he did for a documentary in 2020, I believe. He did say he knew something about that in the documentary, that it has happened. And I think that's what kind of made people believe is there's some legitimacy here. Was he involved? But describe how that story surfaced and describe what you know in terms of how it was legitimized, at least in our local television news.
Well, I know the Levitts, and I knew David while I was the publisher, because I had to grandmom some materials, and we kind of went around and around. But he's a good attorney, I can tell you that. I think he did a good job for the county. So when these stories came out, I'm like going, what? How can this possibly be? And where's this information coming from? Because us as a newspaper, I couldn't find any newspaper sources that were going. So where was this coming from? And so because you had people that were now almost, they're starting to look at prosecution against him and what would happen. And, and at the same time, he was working on a deal with the Cheyenne Reservation up in Montana with some buffaloes and the Ukraine, and
that was
and
that
you
was
hear
pretty
this
weird.
story, and then he's trying to adopt a Native American, which is kind of a no-no in the Native American. So you hear these stories, and then all of a sudden there's this cannibalism and there's this trafficking that he's doing. This child, he's part of this thing, and I'm like going, I know David Levitt. There's no way that could be possible, but there's nobody doing it. Where's this news coming from? Mm-hmm. So David loses the election. This all comes out, the timing, the sheriff turns on him, all of this, and it just looks like, you're at NASCAR waiting for the wreck. Something's going to break, and he's either going to prison, what's going to happen? Well, he loses the election, nothing really happens, you're not hearing anything, and then all of a sudden, last fall, Dateline says they're doing this story.
Dateline NBC.
Dateline NBC says we're doing a story on this David Levitt story. And I'm like, what? So I start watching this thing, and I see this guy who he had prosecuted and put in jail, who was a technical whiz, was creating all this content, producing all this back-end story. This is what they're reporting.
Now, this guy is who?
This gentleman, sorry, I don't have his name, but it's in the Dateline story. So he changed, this guy tried to disappear. He faked his death. He moved to Scotland and reemerged, reinvented himself. He was in a wheelchair, tried to change his appearance, but they finally caught him. He's back here now in prison, is my understanding, that he is actually back in Utah. And
he's a fake news creator.
Yes.
That's was his
what
job.
He did. Yep.
Wow.
And he did it, and it was enough to probably cause David to lose his election and to put the framing on a person. And so this is why I'm talking about news. Fake news, real news, journalism, no journalism, what the internet, this is just proof. Don't believe what you read.
Yeah.
Do some homework, because I'm watching this going, wait a minute. How could this be happening?
And when you forwarded me those stories, I only saw what appeared to me to be legitimate stories that made me think, wow, what in the heck does this, how deep does this go? Was this guy trafficking children? Was he getting Native Americans Native American babies so he can do this ritual sexual
whatever
acts or whatever?
The stories were unbelievable.
You just don't know, because where is it sourced from? I mean, that's always my question as an editor. What is the source of this information?
Well,
because the reason why we never broke this or covered this is my only source as a witness. She had served time in mental institutions. She kept inundating me with links and this and that, and every single rabbit hole she had gone down. Yep. And you just got to say, as a news consumer, be careful what you listen to, and be careful where you get your information.
Well, and without the internet, people wouldn't have these skills. They couldn't have done it in 1975.
Yeah.
But today, this is exactly the kind of fake news that can be developed. And So it's a very interesting story, and I can't wait to see the next Dateline to see what they come up with, because they're still spending the money to do the investigation.
Yeah, and it was a federal investigation, so there's there. I don't even know.
Yep.
But we'll take a little break. In our last segment, we'll talk about censorship. If all this fake news coming out, should we accept that some censorship should be okay? I'd love your comments on YouTube, especially those who are joining us on YouTube. What level of censorship should the big tech platforms take? Should YouTube be censoring voices? So we'll get right back to that after just this short break.